And this is a story that some NHS hospital trusts have told their staff that sex offenders who are born male but identify as women can now be treated on female-only wards. It's been reported Devon, Oxford and Nottinghamshire hospitals are just some of the sites to implement this change. These policies have been put in place despite the Department of Health saying that hospitals should be providing single-sex wards. Joining me now to discuss this is academic and writer and, of course, friend of the show, Katy Jon West. Katy, good evening to you. Let me ask you, first of all, what do you make to this policy, this news today?
Well, it's not exactly a new policy. It's been around for a long time. And the very attempt to eradicate mixed sex wards has been around since 2012, I think it is, or even earlier than that. And it hasn't been eradicated anyway. There actually is a government website where they actually report on the number of cases where there are people on mixed sex wards every month. And during Corona, it's obviously been even harder, they've said, to even manage that. So you actually get several thousand incidents a month of people doing that. So where my issue is with this aspect is, you know, to what extent are we knowing that these people are sex offenders before they come onto a ward anyway? That's a whole element of, safeguarding that I wasn't particularly aware of to date, because when you go into a hospital to be treated for a health condition, no one asks your criminal history, they ask your health history.
Yeah, and I tell you, I've just got the story in front of me, Katy, and a couple of the points that concerned me is what it's saying in this story is that, and these are direct quotes that I'm making here. The basis for the documents comes from an instruction by NHS England, which states that hospitals allow patients to be accommodated according to their presentation, the way they dress and the name and the pronouns they currently use. They have no requirement for the person to have begun to legally change their gender. See, this for me causes me concern. I was admitted myself for a month, actually, in hospital last year on a female-only ward. And it goes without saying that all females in hospital, as with all other patients, you're vulnerable. You know, you expect, when I'm on a female-only ward, I expect there to be females. And this line here that basically says it's based on how you choose to present, how you choose your name and your pronouns. There is no legal requirement to have changed your gender or begun that process. How is it possible that a man who is wearing a dress, wants to be called she, and hasn't done anything else can present at a hospital and say, I am a woman and I want to go on a female sex ward? I can't get my head around that. It feels entirely wrong to me.
Well, this is where the Equality Act is relatively clear. I wouldn't say absolutely clear, but it's relatively clear that people, the protected characteristic is of transition. So it is people who are transitioning or people who intend to undergo transition who should be treated in that capacity. The ability to create single-sex wards, as I say, is something that's been a 10-year aim in the NHS and isn't fully completed as yet. The way you dress and the way you present and you end up on a ward is kind of irrelevant when you all end up in backless NHS gowns anyway, which removes any element of kind of transvestic expression of who you might be based on your gender, based on your appearance. Once you're in the ward, you're a naked person in a shapeless dress type thing in a bed, and nobody really wants to wake up in a ward that they're not prepared to discover coming around from an operation, and you're suddenly on a ward of any group of people unbeknownst to you. So yeah, I totally get that people waking up on a ward like that would feel concerned. So would the trans person, no doubt, as well, waking up, for example, on an all-male ward. Equally, a trans man waking up in an all-female ward. It's the thing the NHS tries to do is it tries to accommodate people, but it makes no guarantees, even for people who aren't trans. And it says that based on the actual conditions, it might be that your health condition is a rare item, and the way it needs to be treated is with all the other people with this same rare condition, and you might be grouped together on a single ward for that condition. And also the more extreme conditions, and like COVID has been clearing certain wards to create this, has made this happen even more. My concern, though, all along, though, is, as I say, that we do not do criminal tests before we treat someone for their health. And around gender, you can change your gender marker on the NHS at a particular stage, and your NHS gender marker can be changed based on the supply of a letter from a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist to say that you are planning to undergo transition. As far as I'm aware, you can't just walk into a hospital and say, I want to be known as she, please treat me as such in the system, but my gender marker on the NHS is otherwise. So I think to a degree, so long as they're going by the gender marker on the NHS, that's fair. But ultimately, what we all want in the NHS is privacy, safety and dignity. And what they should be giving that is something everybody should be entitled to. And the more single room and smaller room wards that there are, or end wards where you can create a curtained off section, that should be made accessible to everyone.
But, I mean, you mentioned, if someone wears a dress or whatever, their pronouns are not relevant, but they are relevant. I mean, I'll say again, the basis for this comes from an instruction which states, and I'm quoting directly here, it states that hospitals allow patients to be accommodated according to their presentation, the way they dress and the name and the pronouns that they currently use, with no requirement for them to legally change their gender. We're talking about trans people, but to me, this isn't even about trans people. It's about, if that is your marker, if your marker is, I present myself to a hospital and what you're going to do is how I dress, the pronouns I've chosen to use and the gender that I feel like using, that is going to determine which single sex ward I go on. I'm sorry, Katy, but I think it's wrong.
Well, I think the issue here as well is the fact that what you want isn't always what you get. And that person is going into the hospital like that is quite entitled to express a desire for that. But then the hospital, just like any other situation, we've discussed this before when we've discussed prisons, what somebody wants and what somebody gets still has to be down to a safeguarding decision, still has to be down to a group of people saying, what is in the best interests of all people here? And I think sometimes, again, these things have to be based on the individual decisions and not blanket decisions. And I'm quite aware that some hospitals have different and varied policies on this, and it's not a universal top-down decision.
Yeah, and I mean, again, further reading this report, it says here that nurses are saying that they're fearful of discipline or censor if they raise concerns about this. And I'm almost a little bit blown away by this story because, yes, of course, a trans person should be respected, but this is even going a step. It's 10 steps beyond. This is basically saying that however you choose to present, and maybe, Katy, maybe what's going on here is that there's a conflation between sex and gender. Maybe there's something like that going on here, because the more I read this, and I've highlighted all my bits that kind of have caused me concern, and actually I feel like highlighting the entire thing, because I don't know who is driving it. Where is this coming from?
Well, it's an ongoing debate, the whole sex v gender thing. Sex is a protected characteristic in the Equality Act, and so is gender transition. And both are entitled to be considered in the making of any decision. And in these situations, again, yeah, if someone has actually fully transitioned, then absolutely they are covered under the law to be treated on a single sex ward of their transition to sex. But I think, yeah, people who are just simply self-identifying, they have to accept that there is going to be situations where they don't always get what they want. But in order to make that person feel safe, sometimes they're going to have to be put into an end room or a private room or a private cubicle, because they because they fall between two stools and they don't fit on either single sex ward at that point in their journey.
Indeed. Well, I mean, it is worth saying that some of the policies have faced challenge. The Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire NHS Trust has abandoned their plans after people have complained about it. And I guess, actually, in fact, it says here that officials have carried out an equality impact assessment of the guidance and has found what they call callous disregard for women's safety. Katy, I suspect that this is a conversation that will continue. As always, I like talking to you and I love hearing your perspective. Thank you very much for your time. And let me know at home, what do you think to this story?
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.